Hello, we're your hosts, Sourish
and Kuan,
This is WaffleByte, where we bring you interesting bites about technology, business,
and things that might change the world.
You can find links to our articles in the description,
And you can skip to the chapters you're most interested in.
but for now, enjoy the show. The thing with being a fresher at university is that there are all sorts of free events. And at these free events, there's always going to be free food. And it seems to me that the only food people ever order is just pizza. So I've eaten pizza at least once every single day for like the past 2 weeks. And I feel like that's not so healthy for me.
That would be a very astute observation you make there. And for me, I had a record-breaking night of 12 slices of pizza in one night from 3 different sources. So that was interesting. But unfortunately, the free food's never going to last, is it?
Actually, I do think there are a fair amount of free or very cheap events across the year. And I had this idea where we could create some sort of AI Instagram and WhatsApp scraper to figure out when all of these events are and add them automatically to my calendar.
I feel like, though, that there are other things that you should be doing at university that does not involve free food, such as...
Surely budgeting is a very valid thing to be doing.
Well, but you might want to spend your time studying, perhaps. That might be a very wise idea, certainly closer towards exam season, or even just as we learn more things, because currently I've learnt absolutely nothing, and all we've done is revision.
I've also learned nothing, but that's probably because I haven't watched any of the lectures yet.
Yes, that might be unwise.
And Kuankuan, you seem to be coughing quite a lot right now.
That is indeed correct, and unfortunately, my whole flat has gone down with this freshers' flu that I've been reliably informed is not actually a flu. But we've all been coughing, and it's comical in lectures because the coughing is non-stop. You really can't hear a break in the coughing, and I suspect germs are being propagated around the lecture hall, and I do feel sorry for anybody who's trying to listen to the professor, because sometimes that becomes immensely challenging.
That's the excuse I'm going to use when I'm asked why I didn't attend my lectures. But the thought for this episode is, Casio has opened pre-orders for a cuddly robotic pet, Mufflin. This raises the question, will humans ever be able to have a true emotional connection with robots and AI agents? Okay, so I know that we've covered the Rabbit R1 in 2 segments already on this show, and we're only 9 episodes in, but I actually bought the Rabbit R1, and I'm holding it right now in my hands. And now, Kuankuan, what do you think of the Rabbit R1? This is your first time seeing one and feeling one in person.
It is. I have to say, this is the first time I've seen it in person. It looks much more vibrant than any pictures I've seen.
Yes. After setting it up for an hour or 2, everything orange that was also in my room just didn't look orange anymore. It looked washed out.
I'm struggling to operate it. I think I managed to turn it on.
Press yes. Now, if you scroll the scroll wheel down, I think it's up a couple times.
Oh,
You get settings, scroll again.
I do get settings.
And now you can scroll the opposite direction to scroll down through your settings. It's really unintuitive, but oh well.
I do not see the appeal in scrolling through settings. I must say, it's not.
Shake your device. Shake it.
I shaked it.
There you go. Now you're out of your settings page.
I am, but I'm not in anything anymore.
If you hold the button and speak, I'll be silent. You can talk to it. You can see that the ears slightly prop up on the screen when it's listening to you.
Yes. What is the weather tomorrow? So it seems that I asked the rabbit what the weather is like.
I think
tomorrow.
you're holding the button still, aren't you?
I am not.
No,
I'm
not.
I let go.
Okay.
And it greeted Sourish.
This is all real time as well, so.
Yeah, but it's now not
Try again?
responding to me. Right, I'll try again. What is the weather like tomorrow?
No, you have to hold it whilst you ask the question.
Oh,
You're such a clown.
right. I see. There seems to be some user error right now.
Yeah, it's
but
not very intuitive.
I will now try and use it properly. What is the weather like tomorrow?
Yeah, so it's almost like talking with a radio, essentially. And you can scroll through this weather forecast on the screen. You probably can't hear this, but the rabbit's just kind of telling us what the weather's like in Fahrenheit, despite them talking about London. But oh well, we'll deal with that later.
Yes, so I'm reliably, well, maybe not so reliably informed by the rabbit that it will be 53 degrees Fahrenheit tomorrow at 1 p.m.
Ask the rabbit what that is in Celsius.
What is 53 degrees Fahrenheit in Celsius? Oh, it's thinking. So I think it had to actually do some maths to calculate it.
Yes.
Which does seem a bit slow, because I'm sure Google could do so with a bit more elegance compared to the rabbit. What else can this do, Sourish? Because so
Oh yes.
far
So if you double click that grey button on the side,
I have done
and if
that.
you heard, you might have heard the camera swivel. And now
Oh,
on the screen you can now see the camera.
I can indeed. It seems to be a live camera feed, which is it does seem to be low
And
quality, but
scroll the thing. Now it's a selfie feed.
oh, it is a self. Oh, so there's a physical camera that is rotating, so that there's only one camera, but it can be
It's
selfie
quite
as in
cool,
it.
yeah. Now, if you want to ask a question about what you see, hold the button and ask the question, and hold the rabbit. Actually, no, I'll figure it out. Just hold the button and ask a question.
Okay, so I'm holding my phone in front of the rabbit, and I'm holding the button. Do I need to say
Yes, you're
anything?
meant to speak whilst holding the button, so you might just
Right.
want to
So
restart
what do
that.
you see in front of you? So it took a picture of my phone using the camera. It is now looking at the photo, which it told me. It does seem to be quite slow, if I'm honest.
I mean, I guess that was accurate.
Yes, so the rabbit told me that it saw my hand holding my mobile phone, which is correct, and it actually specified that I'm in an indoor study or meeting area, which does seem to be what I am in right now. So I guess that's accurate. I do not understand, I have to say, the possible benefits of having such a device like this.
Let me just interrupt you there before we continue. So that rabbit response took a while. You might think that's your poor internet, but I'm currently doing a speed test on my laptop through Wi-Fi with a ping of 7 and a download speed of like 90. So yeah, the rabbit is just a bit slow at responding and has nothing to do with the internet.
What's more concerning to me is that whilst I've been holding it, the battery has gone down considerably. And I don't see this lasting for very long at all. So, has this been your experience with, I hate to say this, but using this device?
Yeah, so when you say using, I think you mean having it put on my shelf, in its case, not doing anything. But yes, it actually has been my experience. It completely drains within 2 days without me even touching it. I guess the pro is that it charges really quickly. I mean, I charged it like 3 minutes before I came down here to record this podcast, and it went up by 22% or something. But yeah, it does run out quickly.
Yes, I'm now struggling to remove this camera.
Oh yeah, just double click the grey button.
I think that takes a picture, doesn't
No,
it?
no, single clicking takes a picture and saves it to my rabbit hole, which I can cut up now.
Yes, I think I've taken numerous pictures, so you might see some. Ah, yeah. So it just went down 2% since I started holding this about 3 minutes ago. So yeah, that bodes well.
And
But do you have anything else to add, Suresh,
yeah,
about your new toy?
um, earlier you noticed that the camera quality is really quite shocking. And, I thought that maybe, it's just to save processing power on the device itself, or that maybe the screen is low resolution. But then I went into my rabbit hole and I downloaded the image, and the images are all extremely low quality. Quite. You can see the image right now, can't you? What do you think of that?
I think that I've seen better images taken from an iPhone from 10 years ago. That's what I would suggest.
Yes, it's not very impressive. Now, one interesting thing is every time it takes a photo or uses the camera to come up with a response, I can see in the rabbit hole that it does this thing called magic camera, where it seems to generate the image that you just showed it, but using AI. So, like, it creates a description of the image that you've taken with it, and then it feeds that description into an AI model to create another image. Kuankuan, you can see this on my screen right now.
Yes, I can, and I have to say I'm not very impressed with what I see. It's a very interesting representation of seemingly myself, and what can I say? I'm simply very unimpressed.
Yeah, it also seems a bit useless. Um, Now, looking into some of the other things about this device, you can, for example, you can record a conversation by just telling it to record a conversation, and it becomes a recorder. So, Kuankuan, let's try this now. Record the conversation that I'm about to have. Yes, you can. Yeah, what do you think?
Well, so the rabbit has started a recording of my conversation with Sourish at the moment. I'm a bit skeptical about the microphone quality, I have to say. I'm not sure. Perhaps they use some AI magic to enhance the audio quality. I simply don't know. But my final question is, Suresh, I believe they advertise that they put some effort into making the experience with certain apps better, such that you can track your Uber Eats or something like that. Is that right? Or maybe you could use Spotify, which I have to say, Spotify works just fine on my phone, but perhaps
Yeah, so they do have a few app integrations. I haven't tried any of them because, firstly, I don't use most of the apps that they integrated with. And secondly, I'm not a fan of the security risk because it requires not connecting your account to Rabbit, but it actually requires signing in on a Rabbit computer on a server across the world via the website. And I don't want to sign in and use 2FA on some other random computer across the world through my browser. I just don't trust the cybersecurity part of that, especially given Rabbit's sus history in crypto. And so I haven't actually tried out any of the apps, and I don't think I ever will. Now, one thing is, when I first got the Rabbit, you notice that the screen bezels are not at all symmetrical, which would be fine if, say, the screen was OLED and the blacks were actually black. But it's not OLED, and if it is OLED, then the blacks definitely aren't black. And so you can actually see like this rectangular, non-symmetrical screen on this rounded front face, which is just not very pleasant.
Actually, my first impression of the screen was better than I expected it to be, and that was mainly because I couldn't see individual pixels. I actually expected it to be more similar to my calculator screen, where you could see individual pixels, but it does seem to be ever so slightly better than that. But I noticed it's not a touchscreen, which seems awfully
Actually, it
inconvenient.
is a touch screen, and you can activate the touch screen by scrolling down and activating terminal mode. I'm struggling to navigate this. So if I activate terminal mode, I can then rotate the Rabbit in my hand, and it activates. Give me a second. It's a bit clumsy to use. So I can rotate it in my hand, and it activates the terminal. Now, a normal person would think that maybe you can have extra control over the device with this terminal. And so, for example, you might want to type out the Linux command or even the Windows command, cd or ls or something like that. So I'm doing that now. And then it says this feature is not supported in terminal mode. And then it's going to kick me out of the terminal. And it disables the terminal in the settings if you ever try anything that isn't like essentially just asking a question via text, as opposed to doing anything interesting.
So functionally, the screen is not a touchscreen.
Yes.
Because, well, that seems very pointless then. It seems to add to the list of pointless design features of this device.
The design, I think Teenage Engineering did a fantastic job. It's just that, like, the physical device is great, but if the software sucks, then there's no point of having the device in the first place. And even like the hardware, for example, the scroll wheel is a bit clumsy to use, in the sense that it doesn't feel even in terms of how much I have to scroll to move down to each setting. And the speaker is also impressively garbage. I think, so I had a TicWatch from like 8 years ago, and that TicWatch had a better speaker than this £200 Rabbit R1 from 2024. So the speaker on here was really garbage. So much of this device just has atrocious design decisions. Like, the device will not go into standby mode or turn the screen off after even like 5 to 10 minutes of the screen being on and you doing nothing on it. So you have to actively remember to turn the device off every single time. And like you have these terrible design decisions repeated throughout the user experience, which just makes it a really trash user experience. The control that the user has on this device is extremely limited. Like, you can't ask it a question, wait a couple seconds for it to attempt to answer, and then ask it another question whilst it's still processing the first question without it crashing. And this is kind of just a bit annoying because it's just much more convenient for me to use a laptop or a mobile phone to achieve the same task, where I actually have more control over what I'm doing and how I'm doing it, and get my answer more easily. Now, another thing is, in this room, I noticed that there's seemingly some university medicine written on the whiteboard. And so I took a photo of it with my Rabbit R1 and I asked it to explain it. Now, I'm no medic, but I think it did a pretty good job. I can't verify that, but it seems to have captured all the detail quite well. I bought this secondhand, actually. I wasn't going to pay $200 for this. But the issue with buying this secondhand is the chip they use on here. It is a rebranded version of a MediaTek chip from a few years ago. And this specific chip has a hardware security issue, which means that you can actually hack the hardware, and there's not yet a patch for this. So when I bought this device, the seller could feasibly have hacked the chip and could be listening to everything we're saying now and even recording everything that we're doing. And I would have absolutely no way to know that. So this is a bit scary and not ideal. And finally, a couple episodes ago, we discussed the large action model, the LAM, that Rabbit launched and pushed out to users on the 1st of October. Now, I obviously now have access to the LAM, and I have to say it is terrible. It's laggy, it's buggy, it doesn't really work the majority of the time. When it does work every now and then, it is actually really cool and it does a fantastic job. Like you can see through the web interface, the rabbit navigating a browser. Now the issue with that is if you want to do anything actually useful, like purchase a product from Amazon, you have to log into Amazon through the Rabbit browser, and that kind of brings the cybersecurity issues that we mentioned from earlier. So I haven't done anything that advanced yet, and I never will.
I think to wrap up, we've established through Sourish purchasing this device that the Rabbit is indeed a waste of money if you want to purchase it for the sake of its functionality, which seems to be non-existent. But Sourish, I understand that you were willing to pay £70 just for some orange plastic.
Yes, I think it does look quite cool, and I like orange. And actually, before we end, let's test the live translation abilities of this device, because Kuankuan here is a native Mandarin speaker, and I am very much a native English speaker. Translate between Mandarin and English, please. Okay, so I'm going to speak in English, and it's going to translate to Mandarin. Hello, how's your day been so far? And Kuankuan, you should be able to see on the screen a translation. You can hear the translation, actually.
So the translation is actually quite good. Admittedly, it's not the hardest translation, but it does say what Sourish just said.
Kuankuan, try and say something a bit more complicated in Mandarin.
今天太糟糕了，因为地铁不仅延误，而且，所以我们花了大约2个小时。今天就是为了去一趟超市。
I was actually very long. Let's see how it does.
So I think it's going to struggle because I was talking in not the most coherent manner, and I told it about my trip to the supermarket today, which was long and exhausting.
Okay, so it has got the gist of everything you were saying. You can just have a scroll through it and see if it's actually quite accurate. And tell us what you think.
So it's actually quite impressive because it basically said exactly what I said, and it ironed out some of the bumps that I had while speaking to it in Mandarin, sort of your normal verbal hiccups. And so it got the gist of what I was saying, which is quite impressive, actually. Now, I will once again say it was a bit slow, but I can confirm that does work. And maybe when you go to a foreign country, instead of whipping out your phone, you can now whip out your Rabbit R1.
I don't really see the point of that, though. You might as well just whip out your phone, which you already have, has a better internet connection, has a better battery life, has a better camera, microphone, speaker, everything. So yeah, the conclusion is, this Rabbit R1, it looks really nice, it feels really nice, but it's really quite useless. It is manufactured e-waste. I think that is the sentiment that I have about this device. Our second story of the week is about the We, Robot event that Tesla held a couple of days ago, where they unveiled the Robocab and the Robovan. The event occurred in a Warner Brothers movie set and started off with Elon riding a robotaxi through the fake streets along other cyberpunk-style vehicles to the front stage. And so what Tesla did is they took over this huge set and turned the entire thing into essentially a playground for them and their own demonstrations. Right at the beginning of the presentation, Elon cited the usual arguments of why robotaxis are fantastic, which included, of course, dealing with traffic issues and making the most of our currently underutilized cars. And to quote Elon, and I suspect that quoting Elon is probably not the most accurate fact that I could give you right now, but he said, "We expect the cost to be below $20,000.
Firstly, I actually think Elon has a very good point when he talks about underutilization of cars, because cars are very much underutilized. People simply don't drive them for very much of the day. However, cars in some ways could be a bit like toilets, in the sense that you might want to not share a toilet with somebody else, even though it's immensely inefficient to do that, because you shouldn't be, hopefully, in your toilet for more than an hour a day. And so I think there's a public perception risk, and maybe people are not willing to go into robotaxis, especially if nobody cleans them, for example. You could have some people who might be under the influence of alcohol or other substances get in the car before you, and you are then in an unpleasant situation. But also on cost, because I am highly skeptical of the cost being under $20,000. Elon has had a historic track record of being bad with predictions like this, and I have no reason to believe he will be anywhere near what the actual cost would be. And in fact, Tesla stock went down after the announcement because of the vagueness and the promises that Elon made, which people frankly don't really believe.
Yeah, I think it went down by a whole 10%, but I guess Tesla stock is very volatile. Anyway, I actually think that this statement isn't like at all useful because I think that Tesla doesn't actually really want to sell robotaxis to other people. I think Tesla wants to have their own fleet of robotaxis, or maybe, for example, sell a huge fleet to Uber or another company like that. I think the $20,000 cost might accurately represent the manufacturing cost for Tesla, but they won't actually sell it to other consumers. I think what Tesla might do, however, is port the software over from these robotaxis to users who currently own a Model 3 or a Model Y, for example. Of course, before robotaxis become a thing, we need unsupervised full self-driving, and Elon once again claims that Texas and California will receive unsupervised FSD at some point next year. And of course, as usual, Elon decided to emphasize the fact that their self-driving is all done entirely through AI vision with no specialist equipment such as LiDAR, which all of the competition seems to have. Elon also said that the robotaxis all have more compute than they need. And he suggested that whilst the cars are idling, the cars can be used like a distributed data center to minimize waste. So you can almost imagine an Amazon Web Services, but maybe like a Tesla Web Services running across their idling robotaxis. I think that's quite cool. And if that ever becomes a thing, I'm going to buy a subscription to that and host my website on robotaxis.
I believe famously, since 2017, Elon has suggested that full self-driving is something along the lines of a year away. And the current regulatory climate, to me at least, does not permit full self-driving next year. And so it remains to be seen when this will be rolled out. And certainly people are growing increasingly tired of waiting for always the next year, and full self-driving never actually coming out, especially those who spent large amounts of money purchasing it for their Teslas. They might start to need a battery swap before full self-driving comes to be.
Yes, but I think Tesla still has the edge here, as out of all of the car manufacturers, they have the most powerful computers and the most data from the millions of Teslas that are on the road right now. Also in the robotaxi, Elon said that there is no socket on the car, and that the car would be charged entirely wirelessly through a pad under the bottom of it.
From my experience, actually not wireless charging my phone, surely wireless charging would heat up the battery and that would degrade it such that it wouldn't last as long. So isn't that a bad idea?
I think so, especially in the summer when your car's going to be very hot and you'd rather it be cold. You're going to end up using more electricity to cool your car, especially if you're running the car all day and you have to charge it multiple times a day. They also unveiled the RoboVan, which is essentially a big robotaxi, but it can seat up to 20 people. And this car looks really funky. And what Elon said is, one of the things that we wanted to do with the Cybertruck was to change the look of the roads. The future should look like the future. And Elon has tried to do that with the RoboVans and the RoboCabs. The event also featured lots of Optimus robots, and Elon said that they were basically the same thing as a car, and that the tech is basically the same. And him saying that actually suggests to me that this whole autonomous problem is a software problem and not a hardware problem, if he calls these two problems essentially the same thing. And Elon also said that you'd eventually be able to buy an Optimus robot for about $25,000.
Was it just me, or is it true that the robots, certainly that were displayed, weren't necessarily behaving autonomously and may have been controlled by humans?
We can never know that. However, a couple of the demonstrations that they made with the Optimus robots were definitely the type of thing that you could just pre-program, kind of like the Boston Dynamics videos that we see on YouTube.
And kind of like Amazon Fresh stores.
Yes, I walked past one earlier today. Now, regarding the Optimus robots, Elon said that, and I quote, "This might be the biggest product ever of any kind." Now, the last time we heard a statement like that was regarding the Meta Orion glasses, when Boz said that a few months ago. And Quan, you and I both made fun of him back then, but we kind of retracted our statement a couple episodes ago. So I don't think we're going to make fun of Elon this time, and I am looking forward to see what the Optimus robots can do for us in the future, and I might just bag on myself.
I think that we will see it, we will believe it when we see it. And it does seem to me that at the present moment, we're not going to see this anytime soon.
As long as it's more useful than my rabbit. And our final story for the week is about Amazon's robots. So I'm just going to read out the headline of this story. Amazon's new warehouse will employ 10 times as many robots. Kuankuan, what's your first impression upon hearing that?
My first impression is that seems tremendously sensible. Because labour costs, as Jeff Bezos would know, are quite high. And whilst robots are expensive, they have a much lower running cost than humans. Now, I'm sure Amazon workers would vehemently disagree and they would suggest that they're very valuable. But it does seem that automating warehouses is quite sensible. Now, I specifically have issue with 10 times because 10 times one robot, for example, is quite different to 10 times 1,000 robots. But overall, it does seem to be very sensible to me, and I'm not at all surprised that this is the direction we're heading to, even though this is costly to jobs, as I alluded to earlier.
The new warehouse that they're building in Louisiana will be their first next-generation fulfillment center. So far, Amazon's approach to robotics has centered on trying to integrate these devices into their existing systems. But this new warehouse will be built from the ground up for robots. Amazon noted that 2,500 people will still be employed at this warehouse, and a sizable amount of them will be robotics engineers. So there still will be a lot of human oversight involved. Amazon claimed that processing times can be cut down by up to 25%, especially during peak demand. Now, I don't really understand why robots in warehouses isn't already really widespread. We know that Ocado has had robots in their warehouses for over 5 years, but their robots actually only handle 15% of the total produce that is in their warehouse, which is a lot less than what most people think. And Ocado claim that in the next 2 or 3 years, that figure will be close to 70%.
I think Ocado, back when their technology was first released into the public domain, people were immensely impressed by it. However, it does seem that they have been unable to utilize their technology very much at all. And in fact, they've struggled tremendously to license their technology. And as a result, their stock price, among other things, has suffered.
Interestingly, this week there was actually a careers fair for computing students. And I went and talked to Ocado. And before I even said anything, the Ocado woman decided to go on like a 5-minute advertising rant about how great Ocado is and how they're expanding across continents and they're licensing their tech to other companies and their robots to other companies. And I find that really amusing. It seems like they're trying to compensate for not actually having that groundbreaking technology. I wonder, is the reason that these robots aren't widespread because they're facing a similar problem to full self-driving technology? Is it because these robots, along with vehicles, they need to be working 100% of the time, and there are just too many issues and random edge cases that need to be solved? Or is this maybe the robots lacking a good gripping mechanism for all shapes and sizes of parcels?
It does seem to be very difficult because you need to drastically alter the whole supply chain for it to be robot friendly. And I think that's immensely capital intensive and just very difficult to do. And so logistic companies, which are not known for being immensely profitable, I must say, they have been sticking to the status quo. And so you need somebody like Amazon who has lots of money in their back pocket to try and innovate. And with that, we might see others make robots, such as Ocado, and perhaps other logistics operators can also try their own implementation of this. But for me, this seems like a issue where there isn't enough money involved, and the current situation, the current setup sort of works, so people are very reluctant to change it.
A couple of days ago, I spoke to a mechanical engineer at Amazon working in their warehouse robotics division, and he suggested that a huge issue is that when it comes to AI models, you need a ton of data for AI models to actually work. We don't currently have good ways of getting data from robots. Like if you think about the human, we have so many neurons and sensors across our fingertips, and we can just feel things. But robots can't do that. And if robots can't do that, AI has no data to work off.
Ever since coming to London, I've spent significant periods on my day sitting on the London Underground.
Sitting?
Well, sometimes if it's late, I get a seat, but in the morning, I certainly don't. but I'm in the cramped London Underground. I'm wondering why it's so bad when it stops at random stations because of distancing requirements, because of different scheduling that's simply terrible. It means that my train doesn't go to where I want to go. Instead, I have to wait for the next train in order to reach my destination. And so it made me wonder why the London Underground is as it is. So, like most of our infrastructure here in the UK, the London Underground, which is better known as the Tube nowadays, is one of those things that we built earlier than anybody else, but as a result, certainly some parts of it is terribly outdated today. In fact, it began operation in January of 1863, which was a whopping 161 years ago. And just to put that into context, in 1863, Thomas Edison was yet to invent the light bulb, nor had Alexander Graham Bell invent the telephone. Since then, we've fought 2 world wars in addition to many regional conflicts. We've progressed significantly in terms of healthcare, technology, and equality in society. So it's really been such a long period of time since the London Underground first existed, and it actually still baffles me how we've managed to build a London Underground over 150 years previously.
In 1860, 13.5 million people travelled by train to London Bridge Station alone. But major stations like this had been built on the outskirts of the city.
So the only way all those people could get to their offices, stores and workshops in central London was by using its chronically congested streets. But in 1863, those clever Victorians came up with a solution to ease congestion on the streets.
An incredible innovation that would transform the shape of London, the Underground.
The London Underground started as a privately run operation by the Metropolitan Railway from Paddington to Farringdon. Other companies, such as the Metropolitan and District Railway, soon followed and opened their own railway services, which formed part of the Circle and District Line today from South Kensington to Westminster. And these London Underground services were built using a cut and cover method, which is exactly like how it sounds, which involves digging a trench, placing the tracks for the trains in, and covering up the tracks so that the buildings and roads could be built on top. And actually, in the early days, most of the London Underground was built directly underneath existing roads. Now, this method was very much necessary because the early London Underground used steam engines. And if you've ever been or seen a steam engine, you know that they certainly need ventilation. Otherwise, you would be in a very difficult situation medically, I would suggest. However, in 1890, the City and South London Railway did not want to negotiate with the property owners on the surface level, which would be necessary for a traditional cut and cover operation. And so the first deep level tube was born. This London Underground service, which ran from Stockwell to the modern day Bank Station, was provided using electric locomotives, which is very similar to the arrangement today. In 1900, the Central London Railway, which was colloquially known as the Twopenny Tube, was opened. And even these comparatively later London Underground services still predate metro services in much of the advanced world by very many years. So these deep-level tubes had smaller tunnels, which meant that they could only accommodate smaller trains for service, as opposed to the wider mainline trains on the cut and cover lines. As such, to this day, the deep-level tubes have smaller trains than the cut and cover tubes, meaning they're actually not cost-compatible. Throughout the early 1900s, though, the ownership of various lines were gradually consolidated, and by the end of the Second World War, all London Underground lines were state-owned thanks to a new Labour government. And actually, I suspect if I gave you a London Underground map from the 1960s, you would see a lot of similar features compared to the modern London Underground map, which just shows that development was really done 150 years ago, and actually we've made relatively little advancement since then. But the 1960s did see the London Underground's latest line, which is the Victoria Line.
Deep under London, a new section of the Victoria Line rumbled into service. For the Queen, who opened stage 3 of the line, it was only the second trip of her life in the tube. But the very automated facilities of what is now the most technically advanced underground services in the world are a far cry from those of 30 years ago when she made her other tube journey.
Now, to commuters, rush hours on the Victoria Line is a nightmare. Just try the northbound platform at Oxford Circus on a Friday evening, which I've tried and it's been truly horrific.
If you've just joined us, please stand behind the yellow line and keep moving down to your right on the platform. Your next service is calling to Walthamstow Central. Please stand behind the yellow line. It's there for your safety. And keep moving down to the right of the platform.
But the Victoria Line proved to be immensely successful. It moves the most people per mile of track on the entire tube network, and it's an incredibly efficient operation because the spacing between stations are longer, and therefore it provides a more express service between major hubs in London.
That stat about moving the most people per mile of track is a bit sketchy though, because the Victoria Line only extends as far as Zone 3, whereas the Central Line, for example, extends quite far.
The Victoria Line also has more advanced signalling technology than the rest of the tube network, enabling an unmatched train frequency of 36 trains per hour during peak times, or a train every 100 seconds. And speaking from personal experience, I've never ever had to wait for a Victoria Line, except that one time where I missed one because the door slammed in my face and I had to wait for the next one. At the turn of the millennium, though, the Jubilee Line extension was born.
The new £1 billion extension would link Green Park with Stratford, providing a vital new service to South London and Docklands. But there are fears that the government are considering axing 2 stations at Southwark and Bermondsey from the scheme to save £50 million.
In many ways, this was meant to represent the future of the tube, with platform edge screens on all stations, plenty of lifts and escalators facilitating step-free access to the platforms, and large ticket halls. Canary Wharf Station perhaps is the best example of that. Unfortunately, though, further extensions on the tube line have been few and far between, with only the rather modest Northern Line extension to Battersea Power Station being constructed in recent years. Before we move on, Sourish, do you know why the London Underground is referred to as the Tube?
Nope, but I can guess that maybe it's because the tunnels are like tubes.
That is actually entirely correct. And when I previously talked about what is now the Northern Line, the cross-section of their tunnels looked very tube-like, which is why people started referring to it as tube. However, to anybody who's been on the London Underground, which includes me, it's very clear that the London Underground has several challenges. And I think this is caused by a combination of the lack of funding and the archaic nature of some of the track. Some trains, such as those running on the Piccadilly and Bakerloo lines, are over 50 years old. Whilst they're set for replacement as part of the New Tube for London programme, this has been plagued with delays, and full rollout of the new rolling stock won't occur until close to the end of this decade, which seems like an awfully long time away.
This is the future of the Piccadilly line. You're looking at walk-through carriages, wider all-double doorways to help customers get on and off more easily, enhanced digital display screens for customer information, on-train CCTV cameras for additional security, and, for the first time on a deep tube train, air conditioning.
Meanwhile, Central Line commuters, which includes us, Sourish, would argue that the Central Line is also in dire need of new trains. The current trains from the 90s have notoriously unreliable DC motors. In fact, if you ever go on a peak rush hour Central Line train, you can feel the uselessness of the motors when it tries to accelerate a train full of angry commuters. But it just sort of struggles, and the acceleration just stops until maybe 3 seconds later the acceleration kicks back in and we slowly very slowly accelerate out of the station.
We are facing quite a difficult set of problems. We have a really ageing fleet here. The fleet is 30 years old. We have a big investment program into that fleet, which will see it completely refreshed. Unfortunately, that's been pushed to the right in terms of time because we've had uncertainty around government funding for that refresh of the fleet. So over the next few weeks, we're doing a lot. So we've significantly increased our customer information so people know what's happening when they turn up to the Central Line.
Initially, though, the Central Line was included in the new Tube for London programme. However, due to budget shortfalls, TfL decided they were unable to include the Central Line in the upgrade. Instead, the Central Line Improvement Programme has been commissioned, which is set to cost £500 million, as opposed to the £1.5 billion of buying new trains. This, however, in typical UK infrastructure style, has been full of delays, and despite work on refurbishing the trains going on for over a year, only a single refurbished train has entered service. The Central Line represents another issue that the London Underground unfortunately suffers from, which is heat.
The Underground's the only spot for comfort when the days are hot. Well, at least back in 1926, when this poster was commissioned. Today, however, that's obviously no longer the case. So, what went wrong?
As we mentioned, the initial deep tube lines were electrically powered. As such, there was no need for any ventilation shaft, unlike the steam engine-powered counterparts on the subsurface lines. However, the repeated braking of the train generates lots of heat thanks to the kinetic energy being converted into heat energy. And that this heat is trapped in the London clay, which is brilliant for engineers trying to drill tube lines. And so some parts of the deep tube are unbearably hot in the summer.
Some of our trains are older trains, 30, 40 years old, which aren't air conditioned, and you know, on some days in summer they can be intolerable. And so we're lobbying the government for capital support to try and upgrade those trains as soon as we can. So the good news is all the new trains we're ordering now are air conditioned.
Another problem on the tube is that until very recently, mobile signal coverage in the deep tube tunnels was non-existent. Thankfully, TfL has started to remedy that, and by the end of this year, we should expect good signal coverage in the majority of the stations. Signalling issues have also meant the trains are frequently unreliable.
The Metropolitan line is part suspended between Baker Street and Aldgate. The Hammersmith and City line is suspended. The District line is operating with severe delays due to earlier service disruption. The Bakerloo line is operating with severe delays. The Central line is operating with severe delays.
Some of the oldest parts of the underground network, like the District line, are consistently suffering with signalling faults that result in cancellation and delays, making service unusable for certain commuters that rely on the service. And despite the 272 stations on the London Underground, only 33 are south of the River Thames, making South London incredibly underserved. Historically, this was due to difficulty tunnelling south of the Thames, but more recently, funding has been a major hurdle to further expansion, such as the Bakerloo line extension that is proposed. Still, TfL and the London Underground do many things very well. For example, they have been very resourceful with the track that it has. The London Overground and the Elizabeth line are prime examples, with some existing tracks being used and service rebranded. The Overground has been extremely successful at increasing the utilisation of existing infrastructure whilst serving rural communities otherwise deprived of service. Recently, TfL has announced new branding for the different branches of the Overground, making it easier for passengers to understand the different services provided.
The London Tube map is about to change as the Overground is split into 6 separate lines. Each name has a special meaning. Windrush after London's Caribbean celebrating England's women haulers who won the Euros in the early 1940s. While the Weaver line running through Havering mild in the borough's special royal status that treated HIV/AIDS patients in the 1980s.
The Elizabeth line, meanwhile, has been a massive success despite exceeding its budget significantly. It has provided fast and reliable service to central London and serves major rail hubs as well as the financial district of Canary Wharf. to me, it's just amazing how we can still have track that's 150 years old and still running. So despite the numerous issues that the London Underground has, I'm still thankful that it exists and most of the time gets me to where I want to go in a quick and mostly reliable manner.
The thought from the start of the episode was, Casio has opened up pre-orders for a cuddly robotic pet, Mufflin. This raises the question, will humans ever be able to have a true emotional connection with robots and AI agents? Does the object that we have a relationship to actually matter? Is simply the perception of an emotional connection enough?
I think that I will never, or at least I very much hope so, that I will never have a true relationship with anything that is a robot. I think that's just an incredibly sad future that we should not look forward to. And I just don't see why I would have a AI pet when I can have a real pet, should I desire one, which at the moment I actually don't.
But I remember you arguing a few months ago that GPs and doctors, for example, can be replaced with AI because they can demonstrate empathy and the human on the other side, the patient, will have no clue whether it's an AI behind the empathetic texts or whether it's a real human.
I think that was in the context of doctors providing a service and the service of hopefully curing your illness or whatever's wrong with you. And I think that's different because that's a functionality, a service, as I said. And so that can be done by anybody or any robot that is capable. But I don't think you can make the same argument with pets because they're providing an emotional connection. And I would say that that isn't necessarily a service. It is something that happens naturally thanks to our brains and our mutual connections with each other.
Don't doctors also provide that connection with the patient?
I think that is secondary, personally. I think that providing care and providing a solution to a medical problem is the primary purpose of a doctor. That is what I hope my doctor will do for me. I do agree that doctors at the present moment, they provide reassurance, empathy to your patients. But I still believe that the fundamental and prerequisite of being a doctor is providing care and solving a medical problem for a patient.
Did you know that just 40% of Britons are uncomfortable consuming news that was written by a human with the aid of AI?
I think that people perhaps don't actually know very well. And I think that's the scary part, right? Is that people are afraid of not being able to distinguish between human writing and AI. I think that's the main issue, as opposed to the AI writing itself.
I don't really get this statistic, though, because 60% of artists claim that AI helped in some part of their music creation process. And so, if most humans still like music that is being made with the aid of AI, why are people uncomfortable in consuming news that was written with the aid of AI? One thing that a relationship with AI can help is with dealing with loneliness, especially for the elderly.
The question that needs to be posed here is that, are you making somebody more lonely by making them talk with an AI? Because you can make an argument that says basically that the AI is providing some connection, and some connection is better than no connection. So in a situation where a lonely person does not have a physical human to talk to, it would be better that if they were talking to an AI as opposed to nobody at all. However, it does seem that it's a distinct possibility that talking to AI makes you more lonely. And that could be a variety of reasons, but I suspect that's a possibility. And if that's the case, then AI should probably not be used to help lonely people because it won't help them.
AI could also be quite dangerous because AI knows how to best manipulate people more than any other human on this planet. And so AI systems may, for example, have a specific goal when communicating with a human, and therefore do everything they can to achieve the goal and likely succeed. And the human is going to have no clue that this is happening. So we have to try and be careful there. One thing that makes our connection between humans really strong is our culture and shared history. And that's probably quite a key aspect. But can't AI develop that culture and that shared history with us? Because AI systems can emotionally grow and mature. And that's one of the great things about AI. It can learn over time. And therefore, this point is perhaps a little redundant.
However, if the AI is an echo chamber or a mirror of your emotions, then people might find it easier to like the AI robot because it's more similar to them. And we see this with humans making friendships. Often similar people tend to be attracted to each other and form connections. And so this might make it easier by making an AI more compatible with a human.
Did you know that the AI companion, and by companion I mean like boyfriend or girlfriend, the AI companion market is in the hundreds of millions of dollars right now, and some estimates actually suggest that it's as high as $3 billion. And I think one reason for this is that if you have an AI companion, you're going to constantly engage with it multiple hours a day, every single day. But is this phenomenon long-lived, or is it just hype?
Well, you would think that proponents of an AI companion would suggest that it has all the benefits of being having a partner without the drawbacks. I think that's complete waffle, and that's simply untrue, because ultimately you struggle to interact with a robot that's either on your screen or sort of a piece of metal. I think that's really challenging to interact with an object like that, like it is a human.
Actually, a recent survey asked people what they most value from an AI companion. And people ranked the importance of phone calling at an average of 5.6, whereas the importance of realism was just 3.2, suggesting that people don't really care necessarily about a real human. They just want some entity that can talk to them. This suggests that the physical embodiment also is probably not too important. And that probably explains why the sex robot market is currently only $200 million, which is a lot less than the AI companion market, although it is growing. Finally, can the rise of AI companions and agents help scientists better understand what connection and relationship really means in a human, and make all of our lives better?
Thank you for listening. We'll be back next Monday with a new episode.
And remember to follow us on X at the WaffleByte. That's the_WaffleByte. See you there.